There are too many traps that can get you stuck when you're on a journey to healing, especially when it comes to dating. Hey everybody, it's Mystic Brew, your favorite Lebanese mystic and astrologer, and this is Shadows of the Heart. As a former dating columnist, certified coach, and an intuitive who's had her fair share of dating experiences, I know what it's like when unconscious habits and patterns tend to rear their ugly heads when you're trying to build partnership. In this series, I meet with various singles who are ready to face their shadows, so I look at their astrology to see what's lurking right behind their awareness when it comes to relationships. In this episode, you'll meet Ash, and Ash is someone who grew up with a very strict idea of what it means to be enough, and how that can sometimes contribute to perpetually feeling like you're not ready to fully be seen and loved in partnership. Let's take a look. Hey Ash, welcome to Shadows of the Heart. I'm so excited to take a look at your chart with you. So let's dive in. You may already know this. You are a Libra sun, Scorpio moon, and a Gemini rising. So there's some really great things to talk about. Immediately, my eye is going to your sixth house. I don't know if you already have seen this, but there is a house party happening in your sixth house, which is predominantly ruled by Scorpio. You have a lot of Scorpio placements. So let's get into it. I've been attracting a lot of Scorpio energy with this series. It's actually really interesting. Do you know much about your Scorpio energy or not really?
In the last year, I actually used to attract a lot of Scorpios as well
Mm,
in terms of partners, and I thought I didn't like them. So when I found out like a year ago that I'm actually a Scorpio moon, it kind of sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole to
mhm.
understand it.
What did you find out?
A lot of my shadows that were unconscious, but
Yes,
I'm sure you can tell me like much more.
of
Um,
course.
yeah,
Sure. Yeah, there's, I believe, a reason why we may attract one sign a lot. I feel like they're teaching us something. So perhaps at that time in your life, obviously, you know best that you were being sort of asked to really embrace and embody your own Scorpio energy and to dive more into your moon. So, I am going to talk a little bit about some of the actual placements that you have in Scorpio, but first, I want to touch on the stellium. So, for those who don't know, a stellium is when you have three or more placements in one sign. It's a highly concentrated energy. And for you, again, you have it in Scorpio in mostly the sixth house. And so that can create an energy of seeing love and relationships as work. We actually had someone else on the series who also had a sixth house stellium. So the sixth house is a house of routine, of work, of service. It is naturally ruled by Virgo. So there's a sprinkle of Virgo on top of all of your Scorpio energy. And with this much energy in Scorpio in the sixth house, love can easily become entangled with a sense of duty and routine and sometimes even power dynamics. So, this is kind of like the fixer house where you may unconsciously feel like the authority, the boss, the fixer in whatever relationships are arising within um, the situations that you get yourself in with another person. Do you often feel that way in
I do.
relationships?
Not so much in romantic relationships. I don't know if this applies to familial
Mhm.
relationships. It definitely comes out there.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's usually some sort of overlap or some common theme or thread within relationships, regardless of platonic, familial, romantic. But it can definitely seep through romantic because of your moon in there as well and Mars in there. So any sort of intimate, sexual, sensual type of relationships, there can be this deep devotion, because that is very much Scorpio energy when it comes to love, but also the unconscious, I don't want to say threat because that sounds really intense, but it can be easy to lose yourself in fixing others or at least serving others in order to feel worthy of that affection. So be mindful of obsessive routines when it comes to love, sex, dating. What?
No, it's just very relevant. It's very funny.
I love it. So good. Okay, so it's resonating. Control may also be a thing that emerges with this, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get into some specific Scorpio placements in your sixth house. And this is heightened, especially if there are any feelings of insecurity, because then the unconscious, sometimes desire to control is coming from a place of needing to feel safe and secure. So some challenges with dating when you have a sixth house stellium, specifically for you in Scorpio, it can feel like love requires effort, sacrifice, or control in order to be sustainable. Now, all relationships require some sort of level of effort and work. However, this is to the point where it can be kind of imbalanced, or there can be a power dynamic at play where someone is superior to the other, or over investing again in partnerships or relationships where it's not being reciprocated. And so releasing sort of the perfectionism that may come through because of that Virgo energy with relationships, and reframing love and relationships as a place where you can really better understand yourself and learn how to flow and unfold with the moment rather than earning every moment or being ahead of everything so that you feel safe, can really help you release any unconscious control or power dynamics that may come up. How's that landing for you?
You know what's funny is I don't resonate so much with the, I guess, controlling aspect or sacrifice aspect. I think because I did that in my relationships when I was so much younger that I
Mm-hmm.
sort of grew pessimistic and avoided deep connection because it did
Mm,
feel like those were linked. So I'm thinking here, like my recent relationships, those aspects didn't come through, but I also wasn't very open
mm.
in those relationships because I had experienced that like 10 years ago. And maybe I never fully worked through that.
So, just so I'm understanding clearly, are you saying that you are aware of perhaps holding yourself back when it comes to intimate relationships because you fear that part of you coming out?
Yeah.
Mm,
When you mentioned, um, I forget how you phrased it, but basically being ride or die when it
mm-hmm,
comes to being in a relationship or being in love, that was very much my MO.
mm-hmm,
And when those early relationships didn't work out, I sort of went the opposite way, which I find I often do. Like if one extreme doesn't work, I flip to the other
mm-hmm,
extreme. And so since probably my early to mid 20s, I've always been very aloof in dating
mm.
and surface level. And so a lot of my relationships have also been surface level.
Interesting. Well, the main thing is that you're aware of it. Like that's important. And I think what you're sharing is, first of all, very transparent and relatable. Ride or die is definitely held to a certain regard with dating, but realistically, it's like, where are we riding to and why does anyone have to die? Like, it's just sometimes it is like a saying that needs to, settle in and really be challenged. What I'm hearing from you is that you're a deeply devoted person when you choose to open your heart up to someone, which is very much Scorpio energy. So that doesn't really surprise me. And perhaps in the past, you have found yourself in situations where your devotion to another person because it may have been something that you really valued about yourself, something that you took pride in, and something that became a part of your identity. It can get really tricky when you are in a situation where that is now being challenged because your safety and your well being is in a place that's being, again, heavy word, but like sacrificed. And
Hmm.
so you had to make a choice. And what I'm also hearing, and again, you let me know if anything I'm saying is like, actually, no, I'm not afraid of the word no. You just let me know. What I'm also hearing is a deep rooted fear of not fully trusting that you would be able to know where the line is should it ever get to that point again, where you have to choose yourself.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
actually something that I have reflected on
Hmm.
over the last 6 months. So I do more recently feel more confident in my ability to draw that line without always snapping to that line at the first signs of something not going in the right direction because I also tend to be like 1 foot out the door the entire time to protect myself.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And it also makes sense that you were sort of talking about the flip-flop of energy that can seem a little extreme. It's what I call the pendulum swing, and I think it's actually a very natural way of trying to find balance. I always remind people you're never going to know your balance point if you don't know your extremes, because you need to know the ends in order to know what balance even looks like. So, sometimes, unfortunately, inconveniently, whatever it is, we swing to either extreme, but it's so that we can become acquainted with the energy that is derived there. And so we know it, mind, body, soul. And that way we can begin to teeter into that midpoint. So you may have been ride or die at one point, and then you were like, oh, that's not going to work. That's not healthy. So you go all the way to what you call like this aloof state, kind of in and out, not fully invested, not fully there. But chances are not a lot of great energy there either because you're also denying yourself of the deep devotion and intimacy that you want in a relationship, which is very clear in all that Scorpio energy. And you have a Libra Venus, like it is at home. You want that connection, you want that experience. It's just a matter of understanding and learning how to trust yourself again to know that if I am put in a position where this is no longer healthy for me, I can trust myself in walking away. Yeah. So expressing your emotions vulnerably rather than defensively is going to be really healing. It takes time, it takes practice. And again, being defensive, you're not doing it because it's fun and it's how you want to communicate. You're doing it because there's a fear that's being poked at. And so, again, part of this work that's true for many of us that can be hard is recognizing that I am responding to something that's not even actually happening right now. I am responding to something I've been holding for a really long time. And this person just so happens to be the person that pressed the right button to bring it all up to the surface. So, that power of the pause, of trying to ground and come back to this moment, it's valuable information when those feelings emerge, but it's learning how to be more regulated and self controlled in how we express it. So, not to shut it down, but to find other ways of how can I vulnerably share what I'm experiencing right now without making it an argument or a battle between us, especially if that's not what you want. So, it's going to be really important to kind of strengthen those muscles so that you know how to feel like you are being honest and authentic, because I'm sure that's something you want in return. And so sometimes we kind of have to thaw that ice by doing the scary step of being transparent and building that emotional safety through open, non reactive communication. which takes me to some of these Scorpio placements. So you have your Mars, your Moon, your Mercury, and your Pluto all pretty close together. Powerhouses, lots of power there, lots of emotional intensity, lots of also mental fixation with Mercury in Scorpio close by, and also, again, those fiery reactions. Now, before we get into some kind of how they play together because they're all conjunct, we've talked about Scorpio moon. So, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've
Hmm.
touched on it. So, Scorpio moon is a Hades moon marker. It is a karmic signature of something that has been carried on through the maternal lineage. It is a cycle, something that you are unearthing and healing through. And so, for you, I feel like part of that is what we were just talking about. And again, I don't know if you've experienced it with your own mother or if this is something that's known within your maternal lineage, but I'd be curious to know if there is a theme of sort of the women in your family self-sacrificing for relationship or dimming themselves down or silencing themselves in some way to continue the duty of keeping a relationship alive.
So I definitely think this has been generational, and I don't know a lot of the backstory with my grandma, but she did go to school and become a nurse, which was kind of unique in her time. And soon after that, like once she graduated school, she got married and had kids. And as far as I know, she was never actually a nurse. Or if she was,
Mm,
it was a very brief period. So in my eyes, I think she did sacrifice a career in order to have a family and to take care of her kids. And with my mom, she was raised in more of a traditional, like Italian Portuguese family dynamic. So she had two brothers and it was just her, and they had a lot more autonomy than she did. So she wanted to
mm,
go to fashion school in Florida and be a fashion designer, but she wasn't allowed to go and move out of the house on her own and go to college. So because they didn't support her in doing that, she never did that. And she never went to school, and she got married very young, like my grandma, and had kids very young, like my grandma, and has been a stay-at-home mom. So I do see that as sort of a pattern. In terms of communication, my mom and my dad, in my eyes, they feel a little bit role reversed. My mom
mm.
is a Capricorn,
Oh,
and I don't know her moon sign, but she's very dominant when it comes to like the bills and the finances. My dad brings in the finances, but she relegates them.
hmm.
And she also was always the one that would be the yes or no of things that we wanted to do. My dad would kind of defer to her rule. So I never got the sense that my mom has suppressed her communication. It's more so that she was never really taught the communication tools to be able to express herself without exploding or express herself without having to control the outcome of the conversation. So it's almost like I'm going to be heard no matter what, and I'm not going to listen to you. And I find myself doing the same thing. It takes me a lot to get to the point of communication because I'm used to kind of shrinking myself so she can be in the lead seat. But when I get to the point of communicating, I find that I have a very difficult time listening. And in recent years, I've been able to course correct a bit on that, but it's something that took me a long time to be able to see in myself.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised that a Capricorn is the disciplinarian of the
Hmm.
house.
Yeah.
However, that makes sense. So it's not so much the opposing energy that you're experiencing, it's very similar, it's almost mirrored. And so it is perhaps this, what I'm also feeling is it's almost like this innate battle to have autonomy and an identity and take up space that is outside of one role. And I wonder if that is something that is a fear of yours as well, of having to sacrifice or bury dreams of yours in order to fulfill a duty or purpose that is placed on
Yeah.
you.
Ooh, um, it's interesting because I was just talking to my brother about this last night. I grew up in a house where, despite my mom being very much the disciplinarian and finance manager and all of those things, my dad has an incredible work ethic. And he was raised on a farm, six siblings, and very regimented. And I picked up a lot of his traits. Like, I find my sister mirrors my mom, and I mirror my dad in terms of how I am and how I operate. And so the way that I've taken on his beliefs is such that it feels like I have to be hardworking, self-sacrificing, shrink myself, do things that deplete me and drain me in order to make a living. Like the phrase that I grew up having beaten in my brain is work is a means to an end. Work is a means to an end. And I, ever since I can remember, did not like that. And
Mm,
whenever I would have conversations with my dad, because I have recently noticed a pattern where I didn't do things unless I had the validation and approval of my parents. So I was constantly at odds trying to convince them that maybe I could do something that I love and I could do something that I'm passionate about and I could make a living doing that. And they could never believe that. And I always thought it was because of me, but now I
mm,
see it's because they didn't believe that.
mhm.
So I do feel like I sacrificed creative paths like marketing. Instead, I chose accounting because I never believed in my ability to bet on myself in doing something that I loved because it wasn't productive, it wasn't safe. Like accounting is very stable and you always need accountant, like that sort of thing. So I've
Right.
done that time and time again.
But I love how you're aware of it, and even the fact that you are picking up and having these conversations, so it's coming to the forefront of your mind. And what's also coming to mind for me is it's giving very, I mean, this is also because you remind me of like a Disney princess. Like you you do, you give Disney princess energy. And so, even as you're talking, what I'm seeing is like your usual sort of Disney film where it's almost like a rite of passage. Like you are finding your own voice, you're finding your own path, you are trying to do something differently than what has been laid out in front of you. And again, no fault to our parents. They want you safe and secure, and they want to know that you're provided for, and that should anything ever happen to them, they don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to be okay. And a lot of times that falls into the realm of making sure you are financially taken care of and have sort of all your things in order. And then we come along and we're like, but I have passion and I have zest for life and I want to do artistic things. And so, again, it is breaking through the limiting beliefs and blocks that perhaps they were not able to, which you've already shared, even with your maternal lineage. And it is, which you are, recognizing that their limitations are not a reflection of what they feel I am capable of, which, even if they were, does not mean it's true. But that's not even the case. It's just what they've allowed themselves to believe is possible. And if you haven't been given the room to explore and find out, then it's not going to be an expansive sort of idea of what is available to you because it's survival mode. And so it feels like you are just coming to a place where you're really recognizing what it is that you are willing to sacrifice for your life and what you're not. And that might be different than what you were taught. And so, again, it is that ego identity, it is the adulting of it all, of finding our own voice and our own path, and also learning how to stand up for ourselves when that's being challenged. Very interesting. Well, as we've seen, this Scorpio conjunction with your moon, Mars, and Mercury specifically, there's clearly emotional depth. There is a passionate drive. There is also mental intensity. You feel deeply, you speak sharply, you love fiercely, but again, emotional regulation may come up as a challenge, especially when there is tension with another person, relational tension specifically. So, this can also lead to obsessive thinking and holding grudges when you're hurt because it's constantly trying to go over every detail, every
Ooh,
scenario. Yeah.
the grudge is real. The grudge is real.
Yeah. Yeah. The grudge and trust issues, which is a common shadow of Scorpio energies. Again, because there's a lack of trust, which usually stems more from a lack of trust within self, that's then projected to into a lack of trust within situations or other people. There's a need for that emotional control to feel safe. So, with this energy, sometimes you may have, and you let me know, you may have attracted emotionally unavailable or manipulative people because of those trust wounds. Or you may, and again, just to clarify, that's not to dismiss someone who has blatantly broken your trust or been dishonest. It is more about the fact that they are mirroring your own dishonesty with yourself, especially when we see like emotionally unavailable people. More often than not, we can tell that this person is not available to give what needs to be given in order for this relationship to flourish. However, given where we might be, especially if, as you mentioned, you kind of have one foot in, one foot out, that dynamic might be ideal because it's not as scary because it's already giving you an exit door. Like there is an expiration for this. Again, might be unconscious, but it's like, oh, okay, so I know I don't have to fully commit to this because they're not really ready. And so I don't have to do the scary part of like being open and intimate and transparent. And so it's really just reflecting what emotional unavailability is coming up within myself that I'm experiencing in these partners that are showing me they're unable to give me the type of relationship that I may say that I want, but fear fully engaging in. This can also look like unconsciously testing or provoking partners to see if they're safe.
Don't know
Hmm.
her. Don't know her. I'm just
Hmm.
kidding. I do know her.
We all know her, I think. She comes out sometimes. It's like so much of our shadow, and I keep trying to remind people of this. It's not this like big, bad, dark, scary thing that's trying to ruin our lives. It's usually our inner child, it's our inner teen, it's the parts of ourselves that are so fed up with being caught off guard or being dismissed or being neglected or not feeling safe that they have learned behavior to remedy that on their own. And so even when we test people, is it healthy? Maybe not. It's not the best thing, but we do it because, again, we know that if I fully devote and open myself up to this person, it's going to be 10 times harder to claw myself out if they all of a sudden show me that they're unsafe. So it's almost like we're trying to find out ahead of time, but what we don't realize might also be happening is now we're pushing people away because they're not science experiments, they're people. And people want to be experienced. They don't want to be tested with a hypothesis. So that can get tricky. All right, before I continue, I just want to check in. How are you feeling? Anything coming up?
All of it is very confirmatory.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. I always tell people if it's right, I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. I'm just reassuring you that you're not crazy for experiencing the things that you experience. So, one other part of your Scorpio stellium that I want to touch on before we move on is your Pluto placement, which is all about the shadow and deep transformation, intimacy, manipulation, power, control, all the things, is squaring, which is a tense aspect. So, there's a bit of friction with this energy with your Saturn in Aquarius. So, almost direct. So this can look like an internal battle when it comes to your desire for transformation. But then again, actually, we just spoke about this, your desire for transformation, but then your need for structure. And it's like the traditional Saturnian energy of, well, this is tried and true, this is what's always done, versus I know there's something else available. Like, I know there's something more. I just have to go through the journey of uncovering that, but it may challenge this sort of traditional structure, or it creates that emotional distance as well when it comes to dating specifically. So, that can show up as dating partners who are either kind of emotionally cool or hyper rational. Like they don't really let themselves color outside of the lines or get too messy, complex, emotional, which again may trigger inner feelings of feeling unseen or dismissed because it can be almost with hyper rationality. Sometimes it can look like bypassing or feel like bypassing. Like the issue is not being confronted. It's just like a math equation that's trying to be solved. And the feelings of it all are not being acknowledged and validated. And so that can lead to feeling a bit unseen or dismissed. Or this can also look like a tendency to self sabotage or emotionally shut down when that control is being threatened with love. And because Saturn is in the mix here, this may have something to do with dad. Dad may have influenced a bit of this, especially when it comes to beliefs, philosophies, doctrine, any sort of ideas because of the ninth house placement that has been adopted, which you touched on that a little bit earlier.
Mhm. Yeah, my dad, I don't think I've ever seen him cry. So
Mm,
he's not emotional. And I think I told you about this. I tend to suppress until I can't suppress any longer, and then I explode and I am dramatically emotional in order to feel seen and heard because it kind of takes a lot of extra effort to get him to register that something's wrong.
mm, yeah. Yeah, your Saturn in Aquarius. So I always say Saturn tells me a little bit of how you were fathered. And so Saturn in Aquarius is great mental stimulation, like a lot of focus on learning and innovation and thinking outside the box. But when it comes to that feeling and the emotions and the complexities and rawness of that, not always. Again, the shadow of that Aquarian energy is that detached, sort of aloof state, which isn't that there's no care. It's usually, again, stemming from a fear of, I don't even know how to hold this or what to do with it. And so, again, for you and what you just shared, there may be a door that is presenting itself to you so that instead of compiling all of the emotion and frustration and tension to the point of explosion. Like I always see it as a balloon. You just keep filling up the balloon, and instead of letting a little air out from time to time, it pops. And so that's part of the emotional regulation. However, if you were never taught how to self-soothe or how to do that, you just keep shoving it in, shoving it in, shoving it in until you're bound to explode. And then it becomes a one woman show of everything that is not working and what's happening internally. And that's not your fault. It's just what you learned and what you know. However, it's also probably not the best experience for you and may cause tension within relationships. And so, what you are being shown is instead of harboring all of that energy until it's inevitably going to explode on anything and anyone around you, learn how to release it, deal with it in the moment. And maybe not in that exact moment if you need a second. Lots of things are happening. You need a ground. You need to sort of like woo-saw so you don't say anything you might regret or act in a way that you're like, dang, I wish I didn't do that. But not allowing time to be the excuse of letting things be resolved because that doesn't work. Time does nothing other than pass. We choose what to do with the time. And so, as things come up, if it feels strongly for you, if you know this is something that, especially if you know you mentally fixate and you hold grudges and you know that you're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to let this go, like this is just going to be something that I hold on to for a while, then it may be best to bring it up. And again, sometimes that fear is, how will it be received? Will they understand? Is this going to cause more problems or friction? Especially if what you have experienced from what you've shared is, I have to be big in order for my feelings to be acknowledged. Otherwise, nothing happens. But again, when someone cares about you and wants to learn you and wants to build a relationship with you, they will also be open to learning what that looks like for you, and vice versa. And so it's just a matter of getting into the habit. And perhaps sometimes it is easier to start with friendships or family, your siblings, whoever else, because these are relationships where they're not as high risk because you usually know they're not going anywhere. Like friends, debatable, depending on the relationship. Family, usually a little better. But again, depending on the support system that you have, picking 1 to 2 people that you really trust, who know your heart, who have seen you grown over time, who aren't going to make assumptions about your character just because you're feeling something, are usually great people to practice that with. So you can begin to get your nervous system comfortable with conflict, which is really just a way to deepen intimacy within your relationships because it allows you to be vulnerable and transparent with each other. So let's go to your Chiron. Are you familiar with Chiron?
On the surface, yeah.
Yeah, so Chiron is the wounded healer. We all have Chiron in our chart somewhere. For you, it is in Virgo in the fourth house. And this is the greatest wound that we come into this lifetime with. However, also a door into what we can become great teachers of when we learn how to heal through this energy. So for you, with Chiron and Virgo in the fourth house, this is wounding around perfectionism, around inner criticism, and especially around the home, because the fourth house is the house of home. It is home, roots, and your emotional foundation. It can also be the mother. And so, with your placement here, it can speak to perhaps early environments where love may have felt conditional. And so you had to learn that in order to receive that love and affection that I need and want, I have to be good. I have to be perfect. I have to earn it through the way that I show up. And so if that is true, then you may have developed this inner critic that's always chattering away in the back of your mind that may tell you things like you're being too much or you're not being enough or something of that nature, especially in emotionally intimate relationships, because it is the foundation of your chart. And so it creates this experience where instead of just allowing yourself to be and to experience whatever's going on, you're constantly in your head questioning, am I acting right? Am I speaking right? Am I looking right? Am I going to get the love that I desire? Does this fit the conditions that they have of me, even if it's unspoken? It's constantly ruminating on whether or not you are showing up in a way that is deserving of this love and experience. And so you may or may not have had partners who sort of mirror what you experienced growing up with caretakers or people in your family that may have exhibited that energy, whether that is being constantly critical, being distant, being hard to please, or again, embodying that energy yourself because if it's happening inside, usually it's also happening outside in some way. Does that feel true for you?
It is so true for me that I never knew until the last couple of years that that wasn't what everyone else was doing. Like
Mm,
it was so autopilot that when I started doing inner work and I started to see this, I didn't like, I couldn't comprehend that everyone else wasn't doing this, that this wasn't just the way that relationships were, or that women were supposed to be in relationships. And it very much mirrors the relationship with my mom.
hmm
So I don't know if that, like, Virgo rules the sixth house, right? Because
hmm
these two houses feel so intertwined for me. The relationship with my mom was very much me being of service, being helpful, being perfect, being the good girl. So like it feels like the culmination of those
hmm
to continuously earn her approval, her validation, her attention, her affection. And my very first relationship was actually with a Virgo.
mm.
And we were together for like 5 or 6 years. And we started dating in the end of eighth grade. So I was very young at that time, but the entire relationship was sort of, and I didn't see this at the time, like a mirror image of the relationship that I had with my mom. He was very critical and love felt very conditional and it was very unstable. And I
hmm
always felt like I had to constantly prove myself as being enough for him to not be flirting with other girls or being behind my back with other girls. So it was this constant hamster wheel of me trying to prove to myself and to him that I am enough, that I am worthy, and trying to earn that like validation and him not criticizing me.
Even at a young age, if that level of energy where it is conditional, where it is you have to prove yourself, you have to earn love, you have to show up a very specific way in order to gain my attention, my affection, whatever else, even if that's not what you know you want, if it's familiar to you, it can feel safe. And so, throughout your dating history, if that's something that you've experienced with other partners, there is something about that rooted experience because, again, you may have unconsciously become really comfortable with proving yourself. Like you can give a PowerPoint presentation on yourself of like, these are all the reasons why I'm great and how I'm going to show up and what I'm going to do. And this is why things are, going to work out because I will do A, B, C, and D. I am dedicated, I am devoted, and I am going to show up and whatever else. And it's like, of course, it's great to feel like you know what you bring to the table. And that creates already an imbalance when we talk about that power play because already you're sort of showing up in a, well, I got to prove myself to you, where really it's like, well, wait a second. Do I even want to be with this person? Do I like them versus always thinking, like, do they like me? Do they want me? Do they want to be with me? Because again, it's an unconscious narrative going on of it's always you having to prove yourself because that's what you've always known in order to seek that love and attention. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just about, let me learn more about this person. Let me see if our values align, if this is someone that I can see myself, enjoying more time with. And then over time, you slowly, you reveal yourself when you feel like you're safe and you let things unfold instead of always looking at it. Because again, this is what you were taught, looking at it as like a mission that you have to accomplish by showing up in the best way possible. Now, with your Venus at 1 degree in Libra, also in the fourth house, this can look like you really loving a peaceful, aesthetic, emotionally balanced relationship and also home life. That's something important to you. Funny enough, with the Disney princess stuff, this is very apparent here. Like it's very storybook relationship, like really wanting sort of that fairy tale, the beauty, the harmony, the devotion at home. And again, not a bad thing. However, it can lead to romanticizing certain emotional connections to the point of ignoring the red flags and the warnings that may come up for the sake of preserving the peace and for having that storybook experience that you may want. So, this can look like avoiding conflict in order to maintain that sense of balance, even if it comes at a personal cost to you, or idealizing partners and overlooking sort of deeper incompatibilities that you know aren't working. Is that true for you? Have you experienced that?
Definitely. If 20-year-old Ashlyn knew this, things would have been a lot different. Oftentimes, it took me months, I mean, in my first relationship, years, to realize that the relationship I was living in my head was not actually being reflected in reality. So that's been a huge lesson for me, along with what you mentioned earlier, actually getting to know the person and having the person get to know me instead of trying to accomplish or achieve and prove myself and get validation from every connection. That's been over the last couple of years like a huge point of inner work for me is just being able to show up without masking myself to portray this perfect image.
Right, because perfection doesn't exist. It is not about denying the aspects of yourself that weren't deemed perfect or acceptable. Again, this is how the shadow happens. It is honoring the fact that I am a deeply devoted, intense, passionate person, and I'm no longer going to hide or dim that down because it makes other people uncomfortable that I have that access to such depth within myself. That's a gift. And so learning how to honor that and embody that is going to be really beautiful for you as well. And then you get to attract people who love that about you. They love Ash and her depth and her intensity and her ability to go into the shadows and feel what she's feeling and do what she's doing. That's the people that you want around you, whether it's romantic, platonic, or otherwise, because they see you, not the version of you that you were taught is necessary in order to achieve A, B, C, and D. So, a couple other things before we wrap it up. Your Black Moon Lilith, speaking of power, is in Aries. So, this can bring a lot of fierce independence when it comes to your energy. And sometimes a battle between wanting that deep connection, but fearing dependence. So, fearing losing yourself within relationships, losing your autonomy, losing your identity, losing whatever sort of self assertive dynamic that you have cultivated up until this point. So you may attract partners who challenge your autonomy in order to see how you respond, or people that try to sort of tame that fire within you by rebellion or withdrawal. So this can also look like fluctuating between craving that intimacy, but then resisting control. You may push away emotionally available partners out of fear of sort of being claimed or experiencing that level of intimacy because of the fear that comes with it of, well, then how do I make sure I don't lose myself in the process? Does that feel true for you?
It does.
Mm-hmm. And then your sun and Jupiter. So your seventh house is predominantly ruled by Sagittarius, which means your seventh house ruler is Jupiter, which is in your fifth house of creativity, children, play, joy, pleasure, and it's right next to your sun. So this is a lot of optimism, a lot of creativity, a lot of warmth when it comes to love. You are very much a natural romantic, and it is so apparent with just your energy. And then this is also something where you can really dream big, and should it not happen, the fall is really hard. And so it can be a deep dive into disappointment because of the pedestal of where certain things are placed. Again, this energy is very playful and artistic, also very generous. And that idealization of the romance can sometimes put you in a position of overextending yourself because of the pursuit of love, or again, just not seeing things incredibly clearly. So, watch for inflated expectations, expectations that aren't grounded and rooted in what is actually happening, and being rooted with love and reality, as opposed to, again, the story that is being created because of the sort of fantasy experience that may be desired when it comes to love and relationships. And not saying it can't be that. It's just about allowing yourself to experience what's happening right in front of you before you jump to that outcome. Because with that mindset, you're not really seeing the person in front of you. And this is how that mirroring can happen is, well, I feel unseen. I don't feel like people allow me to be who I am, or I have to show up a very specific way. But then we do that to partners by projecting this idealized outcome or relationship before we even know who they are. And so it is, again, a sort of ping pong of, I want to be seen, so I need to really see people for who they are. I want to be experienced, not seen as the outcome of a certain mission, challenge, whatever. So I need to also experience someone else before placing them in a role they never asked to be in. And so again, we see how our own shadows mirror us in that way. Lastly, your speaking of sort of that fantasy energy, your Neptune and your Uranus are conjunct, meaning, well, they're not even just conjunct, they're at the exact same degree in Capricorn in your eighth house of intimacy, power, and vulnerability. So, first of all, with your Neptune there, intuitive. You are intuitive. Now, it may take time to trust that because, again, you were taught to rely on external means and validation to know that something is true for you, but you're always getting insight and guidance. And so, learning how to trust that within yourself, you may be pulled towards more spiritual or even karmic experiences with partners because of your ability to merge really deeply with them. This is, again, sort of showing that dichotomy of, I want to experience a deep, soulful, devoted love, but I also fear losing myself with these relationships because of how deeply intertwined we can become. You may attract soulmate level types of relationships. Like you just know that there is a past here that is beyond this life, that you've known each other for a long time, or there's just something familiar, or even taboo dynamics with that eighth house relevance that can push you to transform and evolve in some way, and sometimes painfully. It's just a really deeply transformative experience with the people that you may attract. Sometimes some challenges with this is that emotional detachment or fantasy projection that can come up with relationships. Also, the fear of surrendering emotionally when you are being drawn to these intense experiences, because again, we talked about that desire for control. So when you are put in a position where you're like, whoa, I don't know where we're going, what's happening, what is being asked of me, what I'm experiencing, it's touching buttons, it's doing things, we want to cling to control. But again, it is it is really just introducing you to a layer, an aspect of yourself that is maybe awakening now with this activation. So, as much as you can, learning how to surrender without obviously not being cognizant of, am I safe? Am I being respected? You know, your values and your ideals with relationships. So, discerning between that true emotional intimacy and then illusion is going to be big for healing here, and anchoring in that grounded intimacy rather than that escapist romance again. Because with everything that we've talked about thus far, it is very easy to seek that sort of fairy tale storybook romance as a means to make up for the love that we did not receive from a young age, to let us know, oh, I am beautiful, I am lovable, I am wanted in this way. And again, that's very possible. That is very available, but it takes time to get there because you want that to happen with someone who actually sees the ins and outs of you. And they can't do that if you're constantly hiding it, or if you're just wanting to reach that point without doing the work of actually getting to know each other on a really deep level. So, to wrap it all up with a bow, some things to remember. For you, love is deep. Love is complex and it is very consuming. You're not really a casual type of girl. It is you're in or you're out. Yeah. Relationships either transform you or they unravel you. They're very transformative experiences for you. There is a push-pull dynamic that you experience between wanting control and then craving that surrender. So, needing harmony, but also attracting that intensity and finding the balance within what that looks like. And then also perhaps attracting partners who challenge your sense of self-worth, your sense of power, and even your independence. But these are people who are mirrors for you and your own growth. So in those moments or in those experiences, it's not so much about them in the relationship. They are showing you, where am I still playing small? Where am I denying my worth? Where am I denying my power? Where am I either clinging to my independence for safety or abandoning myself and my identity in order to serve a role or an identity that I am being taught or told is what I'm supposed to be doing? All right.
Super
Talk to me.
insightful.
Talk to me. Tell me.
I feel this confirmed a lot, and I also feel um validated is not the right word. I feel like proud that I have been able to look back because honestly, I've steered away from relationships a lot, especially in my mid to late 20s coming into my 30s because I was doing so much work on myself and I held so much resentment at the other people for all of the situations that I found myself in. But as I've seen like how important all of those experiences were for me to be able to unlock things within myself that I had literally never seen. Like, and this confirms like all of the themes that I have unraveled like in the last decade or more. So it just feels really full circle.
I love that. The power of astrology.
Yeah. So thank you.
I love that. Of course. So, as you can see with Ash's session, sometimes the fears, the limiting beliefs, or even the assumptions can really hold us back when it comes to sharing ourselves in partnership. When we talk about self-sabotage, we don't always think about that as a form of perfectionism. We hold high standards and we take pride in those standards because we want to show up as our best selves. And that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes we really have to take a pause and wonder if we are just holding ourselves back from being messy, complex human beings and instead striving for something that is just not realistic. If you heard anything during this session that piqued your curiosity and you want to learn more about astrology, check out my Astros Basics ebook linked below. As always, we can look at your chart together. Book a personal session with me at mysticbrew.com, also linked below. And please support this show and this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing these videos with anyone who you think could find something useful in them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Shadows of the Heart.